The night was quieter than usual in downtown Portland. Officer Ryan Cooper sat in his patrol car, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. 3 years on the force had taught him that sometimes the quietest nights could turn into the most memorable ones. The clock on his dashboard read 11:43 p.m. when he saw the black Mercedes blast through the red light at 4th and Pine. Cooper flipped on his lights and sirens. The Mercedes swerved slightly before pulling over, its expensive tires catching the gleam of streetlights as it came to a stop. He radioed in the license plate and location, following standard procedure. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed the slight wobble in its parking job. The back tire was halfway up on the curb. The window rolled down, releasing a wave of perfume mixed with something else, the unmistakable scent of alcohol. Behind the wheel sat a young woman in an expensive dress, her makeup slightly smudged and her eyes struggling to focus. "License and registration, please," Cooper said, keeping his tone professional. The woman fumbled through her purse, dropping several items before producing a driver's license that looked brand new. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Cooper asked, shining his flashlight briefly at the license. The name read Ann Richardson. "Because you have nothing better to do." She shut back, her words slightly slurred. "Don't you have actual criminals to catch?" Cooper took a deep breath. He'd dealt with this attitude before. "Ma'am, you ran a red light back there. Have you had anything to drink tonight?" "Just water," she said, then laughed. "Vodka water." The honesty was surprising, but it didn't make his job any easier. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle, please." What happened next seemed to play out in slow motion. Anne tried to open her door but struggled with the handle. When she finally managed to get out, she stumbled, catching herself on the car's frame. Cooper moved to help her, but she pushed his hand away. "Don't touch me. Do you have any idea who my father is?" Cooper had heard this line countless times before. "Ma'am, I need you to perform a few simple tests for me. It's standard procedure." The field sobriety test was a disaster. Anne couldn't walk in a straight line, couldn't touch her nose, and couldn't recite the alphabet without singing it like a kindergartner. The breathalyzer confirmed what Cooper already knew. She was well over the legal limit. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back," Cooper said, reaching for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for driving under the influence." "You can't do this to me." Anne's voice rose to a shriek that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "My father will destroy you. He's not just some lawyer, he's FBI." Cooper had heard all kinds of threats before, but something in her tone made him pause for just a second. Still, he had a job to do. As he secured the handcuffs, being careful not to make them too tight, Anne continued her tirade, mixing threats with tears. The ride to the station was tense. In his rearview mirror, Cooper could see Anne texting frantically with her cuffed hands, her fingers flying over the phone screen. He probably should have confiscated it, but sometimes letting someone contact their family helped calm them down. At the station, Anne refused to take the official breathalyzer test, which meant an automatic license suspension. As Cooper filled out the paperwork, he noticed her demeanor changing. The anger was still there, but it was different now, colder, more calculated. She sat in the holding cell, watching him with an unsettling smile. "You really should have let me go with a warning," she said quietly. "Daddy doesn't like it when people mess with his little girl." Cooper finished his paperwork, trying to ignore the chill that ran down his spine. He'd done everything by the book. There was video evidence from his bodycam and dash cam. The arrest was clean, necessary, and completely justified. As his shift ended and the sun began to rise, Cooper couldn't shake the feeling that this night would come back to haunt him. He'd arrested hundreds of people before, including some genuinely dangerous criminals, but something about Ann Richardson's quiet confidence in that holding cell felt different. Maybe it was just fatigue playing tricks on his mind. He climbed into his personal car, ready to head home for some much-needed sleep. As he adjusted his rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of a black SUV with tinted windows pulling into the station's parking lot. Probably nothing, he told himself. In his line of work, paranoia was an occupational hazard. But as he drove home through the empty morning streets, Cooper couldn't help but wonder if he'd just stepped into something much bigger than a simple DUI arrest. Little did he know, his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine, all because he'd done his job and arrested the wrong person's daughter. Officer Cooper noticed something was off the moment he stepped out of his apartment 3 days after the arrest. His neighbor's cat usually greeted him every morning, but today it was hiding, hissing at something in the bushes. As he walked to his car, he caught a glimpse of movement, someone ducking behind a parked van. At first, he tried to brush it off as paranoia. Working the night shift could mess with anyone's head. But then he noticed the black SUV again, the same one from the station, parked 2 blocks from his usual coffee shop. Through the tinted windows, he could make out the silhouette of someone watching. His phone started acting strange too. Calls would drop mid-conversation, especially when he was discussing the Richardson case with fellow officers. Text messages arrived hours late or not at all. One morning, he found his phone completely reset, all his data wiped clean. "You're just being paranoid," said his partner, Officer Chen, during their lunch break. "Rich kids get arrested all the time. Their parents make threats, but nothing ever happens." Cooper wanted to believe him, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. While writing up reports at his desk, he noticed 2 men in suits watching him through the station windows. They weren't trying to hide. If anything, they wanted him to see them. The warning from Detective Thompson came next. The veteran cop pulled Cooper aside after roll call, his face unusually serious. "Listen, kid," Thompson said, glancing around to make sure no one was within earshot. "That girl you arrested? Her father isn't just any FBI agent. He's Special Agent Richardson, and he's got a reputation. Last year, a state trooper gave his wife a speeding ticket. 2 weeks later, that trooper's daughter lost her college scholarship over an anonymous tip about drug possession. The charges were dropped eventually, but the damage was done." Cooper felt his stomach twist. "That's illegal. He can't do that." Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Kid, guys like Richardson write their own rules. They've got friends in every department, judges in their pocket, and enough dirt on people to make problems disappear or appear." That night, Cooper couldn't sleep. Every car that drove past his apartment made him jump. Around 3 a.m., he heard footsteps in the hallway outside his door. He grabbed his off-duty weapon and waited, heart pounding. The footsteps stopped at his door. A moment later, an envelope slid underneath. Inside was a single photograph, Cooper walking into a local bar last weekend. On the back was written, "Even good cops have secrets." The next day, Cooper noticed his credit card was declined at the gas station. When he called the bank, they told him his accounts had been frozen due to an ongoing investigation. They couldn't tell him more. The order came from a federal agency. At work, things got worse. Officers who used to greet him warmly now avoided eye contact. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Someone had started a rumor that Internal Affairs was looking into his past arrests. "Just apologize," suggested Officer Chen during their patrol. "Call her father," said he was sorry for the misunderstanding. Maybe he'll back off. But Cooper couldn't do it. The arrest was clean, the evidence solid. If he backed down now, he'd be letting down every officer who'd ever faced pressure to look the other way. That resolve was tested when he got home and found his apartment door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but things were moved, slightly supply. Someone wanted him to know they could get in any time they wanted. The final straw came when his sister called, crying. Someone had contacted her boss with concerns about her accounting practices. The same day, his mother's prescription at the pharmacy was mysteriously cancelled due to insurance issues. Cooper sat in his living room that night, surrounded by evidence of the pressure building around him. His phone kept lighting up with messages from blocked numbers, each one a new threat, a new reminder that he was being watched. He thought about Ann Richardson's words in the holding cell, "Daddy doesn't like it when people mess with his little girl." At the time, it had seemed like just another empty threat from an angry drunk. Now those words carried the weight of everything happening around him. As he stared out his window at the now familiar black SUV parked across the street, Cooper realized he had a choice to make. He could give in, apologize, maybe even transfer to another department. Or he could fight back. But fighting an FBI agent wouldn't be like taking down a local drug dealer or gang member. This would be like going to war with a shadow. His phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. "Last chance to make this right, Officer Cooper. Tomorrow might be too late." Cooper deleted the message and picked up his personal notebook. If Richardson wanted to play this game, Cooper would make sure he had his own insurance policy. He began writing down everything, every suspicious incident, every threat, every detail he could remember. As he wrote, he noticed another black SUV pulling up behind the first one. But this time, something felt different. These weren't Richardson's usual watchers. Someone else was taking an interest in the situation, and Cooper couldn't tell if that was good news or very, very bad news indeed. The call came in at 11:27 p.m. on a Tuesday. A domestic disturbance in the old warehouse district, the kind of call Cooper had handled hundreds of times before. But something felt wrong from the start. "Dispatch, can you repeat the address?" Cooper asked, turning his patrol car toward the industrial area. The location was oddly specific, not just a street number, but a particular door on the building's west side. "Be advised, Officer Cooper," the dispatcher's voice crackled through his radio. "Backup units are tied up with a multiple-car accident on the highway. You'll be responding solo." Cooper's instincts were screaming at him to wait for backup. In his 3 years on the force, he'd developed a sixth sense for trouble, and everything about this call felt like a setup. But then he heard what sounded like a woman's scream through his open window, distant but clear. The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and narrow alleys. Most of the streetlights were broken, leaving pools of darkness between the few working ones. Cooper parked his patrol car where it would be visible from the street, remembering his academy training about maintaining a clear exit route. The west entrance was exactly where dispatch said it would be. A heavy metal door hung slightly open, creaking in the night breeze. Cooper drew his weapon and flashlight, crossing the threshold with practiced caution. "Police? Anyone here?" His voice echoed through the empty space. The warehouse was huge, filled with abandoned machinery and stacks of rotting wooden pallets. The beam of his flashlight caught something reflecting in the distance, maybe broken glass. The scream came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Cooper moved deeper into the warehouse, sweeping his light in steady arcs. The air smelled wrong, not just the usual dust and mold of abandoned buildings, but something chemical. He rounded a corner and stopped dead. There, arranged neatly on an old desk, was a collection of items that made his blood run cold: bags of white powder, stacks of cash bound with rubber bands, and a handgun that looked exactly like his backup weapon, the one he kept in his bedroom drawer. "Clever setup, isn't it?" The voice came from behind him. Cooper spun around, but the flashlight beam met only empty air. "Special Agent Richardson sends his regards." Before Cooper could react, bright lights flooded the warehouse. The sudden glare blinded him, and he heard multiple sets of footsteps approaching from different directions. "Officer Cooper," a new voice boomed through the space. "Internal Affairs. Lower your weapon and place your hands where we can see them." His mind raced as he slowly placed his gun on the ground. This was a trap, but it was more sophisticated than he'd imagined. They hadn't just planted evidence, they'd orchestrated an entire scene. "Officer Cooper, you're being detained pending an investigation into allegations of corruption, drug trafficking, and abuse of power." The Internal Affairs officer approached with handcuffs, while others began photographing the planted evidence. "This is a setup," Cooper said, keeping his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "Check the security cameras. There must be footage of who planted this." One of the IA officers laughed. "The cameras in this area have been down for maintenance all week. Convenient, isn't it?" They led him out in handcuffs, past his patrol car where he parked it just minutes ago. As they approached the IA vehicles, Cooper noticed something that made his heart sink even further. The black SUV that had been following him was parked across the street, its engine running. The back window rolled down just enough for Cooper to see Ann Richardson's face, smirking as she watched him being loaded into the back of an IA car. Next to her sat an older man in an expensive suit, her father, Special Agent Richardson. He didn't smirk or smile. He just stared at Cooper with cold, calculating eyes. At the station, things moved with frightening speed. His badge and gun were taken, his locket was searched. Reporters were already gathering outside, somehow tipped off about the arrest of a corrupt cop. Officer Chen tried to speak up for him, but was quickly silenced by a look from the senior IA investigator. Detective Thompson watched from his desk, shaking his head slowly. He'd warned Cooper this would happen. In the interrogation room, Cooper sat alone for hours, going over every detail in his mind. The domestic disturbance call that never appeared in the dispatch log. The conveniently broken cameras. The perfectly planted evidence that tied him to crimes he'd never committed. But one detail kept nagging at him. When the lights had flooded the warehouse, for just a split second, he'd seen something the setup team had missed. A small security camera high in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. It wasn't a police camera, but something newer, probably installed by one of the neighboring businesses that were still operating. That camera might have caught everything. The people planting the evidence, the staged scene, all of it. But Cooper knew he had to move fast. If Richardson's people realized the camera existed, that footage would disappear like everything else that could prove Cooper's innocence. As he sat in the interrogation room, watching his career and life crumble around him, Cooper held on to that one piece of hope. Somewhere in that warehouse, a tiny camera might have captured the truth. Now he just had to figure out how to get to that footage before Richardson's people did, and he'd have to do it from behind bars. The next 72 hours felt like a nightmare that Cooper couldn't wake up from. His face was plastered across every local news channel, his reputation shredded by anonymous sources who painted him as a dirty cop who'd been running a protection racket for years. Sitting in his holding cell, Cooper watched his fellow officers walk past, their eyes carefully avoiding his. These were people he'd worked with, shared meals with, trusted with his life. Now they looked at him like he was a stranger, or worse, a traitor. "Your bank accounts have been frozen," his court-appointed lawyer told him during their first meeting. "Your apartment's being searched as we speak. They're saying they found text messages on a burner phone linking you to local drug dealers." "That's impossible," Cooper said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I've never—" "Save it," the lawyer cut him off, shuffling through papers. "They've got evidence, witness statements, everything. Someone really wants you to go down for this." Meanwhile, across town, Ann Richardson's DUI charge had mysteriously vanished from the system. According to official records, she'd never even been arrested. The dash-cam footage from that night, corrupted due to a technical malfunction. Officer Chen tried to visit him once, looking nervous. "Listen, man, I believe you, but my wife's pregnant. I can't risk my job. You understand, right?" Cooper understood all too well. Richardson's influence was like a poison, spreading through every part of his life. His sister had lost her job. His mother's medical insurance was suddenly under review. Even his landlord had served him an eviction notice, citing complaints that had never existed before. The evidence against him kept piling up. Internal Affairs claimed they'd found deposits in offshore accounts under his name. Witnesses came forward saying they'd paid him protection money. Each piece of evidence was clearly fabricated, but it was done with a professional touch that made it seem real enough to stick. Late one night, as Cooper lay on his uncomfortable cell bunk, a guard slipped him a note. "Watch the news tomorrow. You're not the first." The next morning, a story broke about another police officer in a different state who'd arrested Richardson some 2 years ago. That officer had been found guilty of corruption and was serving time. His case looked eerily similar to Cooper's: planted evidence, mysterious witnesses, frozen accounts. But something was different this time. A reporter from a small online news site had started asking questions about both cases. The article mentioned patterns, coincidences that seemed too perfect. For the first time since his arrest, Cooper felt a tiny spark of hope. That hope was quickly tested. The reporter's website went down due to technical difficulties. Her social media accounts disappeared. It was like she'd never existed. In his cell, Cooper started mapping everything out in his mind. The warehouse camera he'd spotted might still have the footage, but he had no way to get to it. His phone calls were monitored, his visitors restricted. Richardson had trapped him completely. Then came the offer. A guard passed along a message. If Cooper signed a confession, admitted to everything, all the pressure on his family would stop. His sister would get her job back. His mother's insurance would be restored. He'd serve a few years, but his family would be taken care of. The choice tormented him. His principles said to fight, to never give in to corruption. But watching his family suffer, knowing it would only get worse, that was a different kind of torture. As Cooper wrestled with the decision, he received an unexpected visitor. She introduced herself as Agent Torres from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility. Unlike the other investigators, she didn't look at him with contempt. "I've been watching Richardson for years," she said quietly, glancing at the security camera in the corner. "You're not the first person he's tried to destroy, but you might be the one who helps me stop him." Cooper studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. He'd learned the hard way not to trust anyone, especially federal agents. "Why should I believe you?" Agent Torres slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, surveillance shots of Richardson meeting with known criminals, documents showing a pattern of abuse of power spanning years. "Because I've lost people too," she said. "Good cops, honest agents, all destroyed because they crossed Richardson's path. But he's gotten sloppy this time. That warehouse camera you spotted, it's still there. We just need to move fast." For the first time in days, Cooper felt the fog of despair lifting. But he also knew that hope could be dangerous. Richardson had proven he could reach anywhere, hurt anyone. "My family," Cooper started. "Already taken care of," Torres cut in. "As of an hour ago, they're in protective custody. Richardson doesn't know yet, but when he finds out," she left the sentence hanging. Cooper straightened in his chair. "What's the plan?" Torres leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "First, we need to get that footage. Then we're going to do something Richardson never expects. We're going to make this very, very public." As she outlined the plan, Cooper felt something he hadn't experienced since this nightmare began: a chance. It wasn't much, just a small crack in Richardson's seemingly perfect operation. But sometimes a small crack was all you needed to bring down an entire wall. Agent Torres' plan moved quickly. Within hours of their meeting, Cooper found himself being transferred to a different holding facility, or at least that's what the paperwork said. In reality, the transport van took him to a safe house on the outskirts of town. "We've got 24 hours before Richardson realizes something's wrong," Torres explained, setting up her laptop on a worn kitchen table. "The warehouse camera feeds to a private security company's cloud storage. Richardson's people are good, but they didn't know about this system." Cooper watched as she pulled up footage from the night of his arrest. The video quality wasn't perfect, but it clearly showed several men entering the warehouse hours before Cooper arrived. They were carrying duffel bags, the same ones that would later contain the planted evidence. "This is good," Cooper said, leaning closer to the screen. "But Richardson will just say these were my accomplices." Torres smiled. "Keep watching." The footage continued. One of the men turned toward the camera, making a phone call. Torres froze the frame and enhanced it. Even with the grainy quality, there was no mistaking the face. It was one of Richardson's trusted FBI agents. "We've got more," Torres said, switching to another file. "Remember that reporter who disappeared after asking questions? She didn't disappear, we hit her. And she's been busy." The reporter had gathered statements from other officers across the country who'd encountered the Richardson family. Each story followed the same pattern. An arrest, followed by threats, then planted evidence and destroyed careers. But this time, there was a paper trail. "Richardson got arrogant," Torres explained. "He started using the same tactics, the same people. We've tracked wire transfers, phone records, everything. But we need something more, something that'll make this so public he can't make it disappear." Cooper thought about the night he'd arrested Ann Richardson. "The dash cam footage from my patrol car. They said it was corrupted, but what if it wasn't?" Torres was already typing. "Department procedure requires 3 backup copies of all dash cam footage. 2 are accessible to senior officers, but the third goes directly to state archives," Cooper finished. "Richardson could corrupt the police copies, but the state system is completely separate." They spent the next few hours building their case. The warehouse footage proved the setup. The dashcam video showed the legitimate arrest. The reporter's research exposed the pattern. But they needed one more piece, something to break Richardson's wall of protection. It came from an unexpected source. Officer Chen called Torres' secure line, his voice shaking. "I found something in the evidence room. When they searched Cooper's locker, they logged in a phone as evidence. But I was there when they searched it. There was no phone. They planted evidence to search for planted evidence," Torres said, "and they logged it officially. That's the mistake we needed." The next part of the plan was the riskiest. They needed to get all of this information to multiple news outlets simultaneously, while also filing official reports with the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility and the Department of Justice. If they moved too slowly, Richardson would shut them down. Too quickly, and they might miss something crucial. Cooper watched as Torres coordinated with her trusted team. Reporters were briefed in secure locations. Federal agents who weren't under Richardson's influence were brought in. Each person only knew their part of the plan. Only Torres and Cooper saw the whole picture. "What about my family?" Cooper asked as evening approached. "Once this starts, they're safe," Torres assured him. "But there's something you should know. Your mother, she's the one who first contacted me months ago. She used to work as a clerk in the FBI office. She saw things, kept records. She knew someday someone would need them." Cooper felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. His mother had always taught him to stand up for what was right, but he never imagined she'd been fighting her own silent battle against corruption. As night fell, they made their final preparations. The evidence was packaged, the statements recorded, the videos backed up to secure servers. Tomorrow morning, everything would break at once: news stories, federal investigations, internal affairs probes. "Once we start this," Torres warned, "there's no going back. Richardson will know exactly who's behind it. He'll come at us with everything he has." Cooper looked at the evidence spread out before them, proof of years of corruption, abuse of power, and ruined lives. He thought about his fellow officers who'd turned their backs on him, about his family in hiding, about every person Richardson had destroyed. "Good," Cooper said firmly. "Let him come." Torres nodded, understanding in her eyes. She picked up her phone and sent a single text message, the signal to her team to begin uploading everything. "Get some rest," she told Cooper. "Tomorrow, we go to war with one of the most powerful men in the FBI. And this time, he's the one who won't see it coming." That night, as Cooper tried to sleep on the safe house's lumpy couch, he thought about how a simple traffic stop had led to all of this. Sometimes doing the right thing came with a heavy price. But as he drifted off, he remembered something his mother used to say: "The truth doesn't need to be protected, it just needs someone brave enough to speak it." Tomorrow, they would speak the truth, and no amount of power or influence would be able to silence it. The morning broke with the buzz of a cell phone. Agent Torres was already awake, watching news channels on multiple screens she'd set up in the safe house. Cooper sat up on the couch, his heart racing as he saw the headlines starting to roll across the screens. FBI agent accused of systematic corruption. Pattern of abuse. Federal investigation launched. Exclusive. Evidence of law enforcement frame-ups. "It's working," Torres said, her eyes fixed on the screens. Local stations picked it up first, then national news. Richardson's usual contacts can't kill all these stories at once. Cooper's phone buzzed again, a secure line Torres had given him. It was Officer Chen. "You need to see this." Richardson just stormed into the station. He's not taking it well." At FBI headquarters, chaos was erupting. Agents who'd been loyal to Richardson for years were suddenly facing questions about their involvement. Internal affairs investigators were seizing computers and files. The warehouse footage was playing on every news channel, showing Richardson's men planting evidence clear as day. "He's going to make his move soon," Torres said, checking her weapon. "Richardson doesn't surrender, he attacks." She was right. Within hours, new evidence began appearing, attempting to discredit Cooper and Torres. Bank records showing they'd worked together for years. Fake emails suggesting a conspiracy. But this time, something was different. "Nobody's buying it," Chen reported over the phone. "Every time Richardson's people release something, our team releases proof it's fake. The reporter you worked with, she's live on national news right now, showing documents that prove how Richardson's team creates false evidence." The tide was turning, but the real battle was just beginning. Richardson wasn't going down without a fight. Agent Torres. A junior agent burst into the safe house. "Richardson's called a press conference at FBI headquarters. He's demanding Cooper show up to face justice in person." Torres and Cooper exchanged looks. This was a trap, obviously, but it was also an opportunity. "If we don't show," Cooper said, "he'll use it to claim we're hiding because we're guilty." Torres nodded slowly. "And if we do show up, he'll have his people waiting. Could get ugly." Then let's make it uglier for him, Cooper replied, an idea forming. You said we need to make this so public he can't make it disappear. What's more public than a showdown at his own press conference? The next hour was a blur of preparation. Torres's team positioned backup agents throughout FBI headquarters. The reporter who'd helped expose Richardson made sure every major news outlet was present. Cooper's mother released her stored records to all the networks simultaneously, years of documented corruption now impossible to hide. As Cooper and Torres pulled up to FBI headquarters, the scene was chaos. Reporters swarmed the entrance. Protesters held signs demanding justice. Richardson's black SUV sat out front, a silent reminder of all the times it had followed Cooper, trying to intimidate him. Inside, Richardson stood at a podium, his usual confident smile now strained. His daughter Anne sat in the front row, no longer smirking. The evidence of her DUI arrest was now public, along with video of her father's attempts to cover it up. Officer Cooper, Richardson's voice boomed through the speakers as Cooper and Torres entered. Come to confess. Cooper walked straight to the podium, Torres at his side. News cameras rolled as he faced Richardson. Actually, Cooper said, his voice steady, I'm here to do my job. The same job I was doing the night I arrested your daughter. The same job you tried to stop me from doing through threats, frame-ups, and corruption. He turned to face the cameras directly. Every piece of evidence against me was planted. We have proof. Every witness was coerced. We have their statements. Every account frozen, every family member threatened, it's all documented. And now, everyone can see it. Richardson's face twisted with rage. You think you can come into my house and... This isn't your house, Torres cut in, stepping forward. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, not your personal kingdom. And today, it's taking back its integrity. As if on cue, federal agents began entering the room, not Richardson's loyal followers, but agents from the Office of Professional Responsibility. They carried warrant papers and evidence bags. Richardson reached inside his jacket. Several agents drew their weapons, but Cooper was faster. 3 years of police work had honed his instincts. He tackled Richardson just as he pulled out not a weapon, but a phone, his last attempt to trigger his fail-safe plans now thwarted. Special Agent Richardson, Torres read from an official document, her voice carrying across the now silent room, you're under arrest for corruption, abuse of power, witness tampering, evidence tampering. The list went on. With each charge, Cooper watched Richardson's empire crumble. The man who'd tried to destroy him was being destroyed by his own actions, his own arrogance. Anne Richardson stood up, tears in her eyes. Daddy, what did you do? What did you make me part of? As Richardson was led away in handcuffs, Cooper felt no satisfaction, only relief. The truth had finally come out, but at what cost? How many careers had been ruined, how many lives affected, before someone finally stood up to stop it? Torres placed a hand on his shoulder. It's not over. There'll be trials, testimonies. Some of his people are still out there. Cooper nodded. Then we'll keep doing our jobs, the right way. The way it's supposed to be done. Outside, the sun was setting over the city. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing the moment for the evening broadcasts. Cooper's phone buzzed with messages from fellow officers, apologizing, offering support, asking how they could help make things right. The system wasn't perfect, but today it had worked. One corrupt agent's power had been broken because people chose to stand up, to tell the truth, to do what was right despite the cost. And somewhere in the city, a black Mercedes sat in an impound lot, its driver's DUI charge now permanently on record, proof that justice, though sometimes delayed, couldn't be denied forever. 1 month after Richardson's arrest, Cooper sat at his old desk in the police station, sorting through a stack of files. His return to duty had been quiet, no ceremony, no big announcements. That's exactly how he wanted it. The morning sun streamed through the station windows as Officer Chen dropped a coffee on his desk. Still can't believe how everything turned out, Chen said, pulling up a chair. You know they're talking about making a movie about all this. Cooper shook his head, smiling. The past month had been a whirlwind of changes. Richardson's trial was set for spring, with dozens of witnesses ready to testify. His network of corrupt officials was unraveling, with new revelations coming out daily. Got something you should see, Chen said, sliding a newspaper across the desk. The headline read, FBI announces major ethics reform after Richardson scandal. Below was a picture of Agent Torres, now promoted to head a new anti-corruption task force. Cooper's phone buzzed, a text from his mother. She was back home, her insurance restored, her life returning to normal. But she wasn't just sitting quietly anymore. She'd become an advocate for whistleblower protection, using her experience to help others stand up against corruption. Officer Cooper. A young rookie approached his desk nervously. There's someone here to see you. In the station's lobby stood Ann Richardson, looking very different from the angry young woman he'd arrested that night. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her father's arrogance had disappeared from her face. I owe you an apology, she said quietly when Cooper approached. What my father did, what I helped him do, it was wrong. I'm testifying against him at the trial. Cooper studied her face, seeing genuine remorse. That can't be easy. Neither was standing up to him like you did, she replied. I'm in counseling now, dealing with how he raised me, how he taught me to treat people. I just wanted you to know. That DUI was a wake-up call. I'm 6 weeks sober. After she left, Cooper walked through the station, noting how different everything felt. Officers who'd once avoided him now sought his advice. The wall of silence that had protected corrupt cops was cracking, with more officers willing to speak up about misconduct. His desk phone rang, Agent Torres with an update. The investigation had expanded beyond Richardson, uncovering similar corruption in other cities. Cooper's case had opened the floodgates, giving other officers the courage to come forward with their own stories. We're making real changes, Torres said. New oversight procedures, better protection for officers who report corruption, mandatory reviews of all complaint dismissals. Richardson thought he could break the system, but he ended up forcing us to fix it. Later that afternoon, Cooper responded to a traffic stop, a routine call, just like the one that had started everything. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed a young officer watching from a nearby patrol car. Wanted to see how you handle it, the rookie explained afterward. After everything that happened, well, you showed us that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. That evening, Cooper visited the warehouse where he'd been framed. The building was different now, cleaned up, renovated into office space. The security camera that had caught Richardson's men planting evidence was still there, a silent reminder that the truth has a way of coming out. His phone buzzed again, a message from his sister. She'd gotten a better job than the one she'd lost, working for a company that valued integrity over connections. Sometimes bad things lead to good changes, she'd written. At home, Cooper found a letter waiting in his mailbox. Inside was an official commendation from the FBI director, praising his unwavering commitment to justice in the face of extraordinary pressure. Along with it was a personal note from Torres. Some battles are worth the scars. He pinned the commendation next to his badge, not as a celebration of victory, but as a reminder. A reminder that one person standing up for what's right can inspire others to do the same. A reminder that even the most powerful corruption can be brought down when people refuse to look the other way. The next morning, Cooper arrived early at the station, just like always. As he sipped his coffee, watching the sun rise over the city, his phone lit up with a news alert. Another corrupt official had been arrested, this time in a different state. The article mentioned the Richardson effect, a new term for the wave of anti-corruption reforms sweeping through law enforcement. Officer Chen appeared at his desk, case file in hand. Ready to get back to work? Got a weird case that needs your attention. Cooper smiled, standing up. The big drama was over, but the real work, the daily commitment to doing things right, was just beginning. And that's exactly where he wanted to be. As he followed Chen to the briefing room, Cooper passed the station's main entrance. The department's motto was engraved above the door, to protect and serve. Thanks to people willing to stand up for what's right, those weren't just words anymore. They were a promise being kept, one day at a time.